Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. Today's guest is Nancy Orlen Weber. She has lived a life that reads like a mystery novel. She started her career as a registered nurse, but a terrifying near-death experience while she was 5 months pregnant cracked her world open and changed her path forever. That crisis became the catalyst for her new life as a psychic detective, where she has spent over 40 years helping law enforcement solve crimes and finding missing persons. She's here to share how she navigated that profound shift, how she learned to trust her intuition when our life depended on it, and how she helps others solve the inner mysteries of their own souls. So, Nancy, it's a pleasure to have you on Fieldcraft. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ezekiel. It's an honor to be here. I'm thrilled. How can I be of service?
Okay, let's dive in, Nancy. Your transition from a registered nurse to a psychic detective is fascinating, but it started with a traumatic crisis. You survived the near-death experience while you were, 5 months pregnant. So can you take us back to that specific moment? How did that terrifying event become the doorway to the intuitive gifts you use today?
Thank you. I'm happy to share. If it helps others to know, sometimes we don't freeze in fear. Most of the time I would, but that time I felt lost to begin with. I lived in Puerto Rico. My husband at the time, I was married to Dr. Gilbert Arnold Preston. He had a fellowship for studying the brain, and a laboratory was there. I had no car. He had the car. I had no phone. And so right away, he got very agitated if things didn't go his way there. I had no idea he would be violent. And one day, I was 5 months pregnant. He walked in and started throwing me against a wall and then started to strangle me. I remember knowing, because before that, I was a good little girl, no matter what. I was a yes person somewhat, and rebellious a lot, a weird mix, right? Because I didn't want to be truthful to myself. And so I remember the moment in which I felt like I was dying and that if he continued to strangle me, I would be dead. And as a nurse, I understood that. And so I did, the only thing I knew to do was pretend I had already died. And I just went totally limp, and he let go, and I fell to the floor, purposely protecting the baby, but he didn't know that. He couldn't see that. And so I lay there for about 15 minutes. I was watching him walk in to the kitchen, getting a drink for himself or whatever, but his back was to me. And after about 10, 15 minutes, I don't know how long, I stood up. And it was weird because that brief few minutes, I went from, oh my God, I almost died, to you will be dead if you open your mouth again to me or touch me. I was born in Brooklyn, and I'm told I flew out of the womb. So suddenly all of it came together. And I walked over to him, and he looked like he was in shock. And I said, I would suggest you don't sleep at night. There may be a knife in your heart. You ever touch me again, you will be dead. And I walked away, and I thought, I hope he believes me. I had no clue, but I thought, oh God, if I really have to do it, I don't know that I can. But I could, I realized, for the baby. I couldn't do it for myself. I could do it for the baby. And it's the same thing that when I went into labor, and for the next 4 months, he was very, very careful. He didn't say anything or do anything, but I was terrified of him. And I realized that living that way was the unhealthiest thing I could do. But I couldn't get out. There was no way to go. So I made up songs for the baby. And as soon as he left work, and I was alone, I would talk to the baby. I would ease my path. I would deep breathe a lot, and I would try and untwist the tension, you know? And I was ready to do whatever I could do to make sure the baby never had him for a father. I didn't know how that would happen. 4 months later, I was going to give birth, but I couldn't because he had injured another disc. I had previously been injured by a patient. So I had spinal surgery when I was 21, and I'm 25 there. So at 25, the doctors were Navy doctors, OBGYN, and they left me and my neighbor, who was also ready to give birth, alone for 10 hours. So I was 10 hours on Pitocin because my uterus wouldn't work. I didn't know how injured I was, but I could feel it. And so they forgot us. And when they came back, gave birth, both that woman and I went back in 2 weeks later, dying. We were both given 8 hours to live. She died, and I became what I call righteous anger. You are never going to be alone with that man. I will see to it. And I got off the deathbed, signed myself out, refused permission to treat. And that was the first part of that journey that synthesized everything for me after that. It opened me up to all possibilities.
All right. All right, Nancy, thank you very much for sharing your story. So, coming from a scientific medical background as a nurse, so how hard was it to accept these new unexplained abilities? Did you feel like you were losing your grip on the life you had planned?
No, not at all. I kept to myself a lot. I was an introvert and shy, double whammy. But a lot of it was private to me. And I had always been what we now know and call psychic, which to me just means your soul is giving you information. Listen to it and follow it. So I had done that, but I didn't know what it was until my last job in nursing, actually. Before, well, this is years after. I left him as soon as we got back to the States, and I had to work, so I stayed nursing, had surgery because of the injuries, and went back right away to nursing because I had a little girl to take care of, divorced him. But my last job was the job I was looking for the whole time. And it was running an acute psychiatric unit. And it was people who had been locked up 20 years, burning themselves, all kinds of things. And it was an experimental unit where I didn't have to give meds, no medication, almost none. And so the psychosis that they had was different, each one. And there I was able to apply my gifts. I didn't even think of them, and I didn't call them anything. I remember one of a woman who burned herself over 20 years. And she was a new admission walking back and forth in the big room, which was the entry to 10 private rooms for 10 days. And this was in the South Bronx. It's the highest crime rate in the country at the time. And her daughter and son-in-law took her there and said she's been refusing for 20 years to go out of her apartment. They had to drag her there. And then they left, and she's walking back and forth, and I'm looking at her, and I see an image. Now, she was a Black woman, about 60 years old, and I see this long, blonde-haired white woman in her abdomen as an image. And I jumped up, and I said, "Who is Celia?" She goes, "You see her?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "She was in bed with your husband." She said, "Yes." And he kicked me out of the house. I said, "That's why you're trying to burn her out." She said, "Yes." I said, "We could get rid of her." She said, "Okay." And we did. In 10 days, I took her home, did home visits for a year. She learned how to cook, clean, take care of herself, go shopping, visit her daughter and son-in-law. She had a life. And I thank Florence every day because she taught me to trust my gifts. That changed everything. And the unit asked me to do everything. The chief of psychiatry for the state of New York offered me the top research post. That's when I walked away and said no. I didn't know what I would do.
Hmm.
I didn't care. I just knew enough was enough for me. I knew what I understood, and I didn't want labels of schizophrenic for somebody and paranoid. Trauma's trauma, and how they express it, whether it's what you ate, what you were exposed to, what happened in utero. Everyone's different, you know? And it was respected by everyone who worked with me. I was offered the top post in New York State Psychiatry, not as a nurse, but as a researcher. And I realized I do know more than they are showing people. And I went on a kind of a hunt as a detective wanting to solve a puzzle. I spoke to a lot of people who did research on schizophrenia and found lots of good answers that still today they don't think about.
All right, Nancy. So you work on incredibly heavy cases like homicides and missing persons. So
Sure.
how do you manage the emotional weight of seeing that kind of trauma without letting it break you?
Well, in today's world, I work far less on it. Being 81, I take my time and I work as a medical intuitive, animal communicative, but I always have worked on all of it, the whole spectrum. So when I got involved with the detectives in 1980, nursing helped me learn you do
Mhm.
the work. And I watched the detectives. When I started working with them, I took what I learned from my first nursing teacher about any things my mind was busy with or was worried about or might be uncomfortable if I did this work, put it in a bag, put it outside and do your work, and then take a look at everything. So I was able to go to fresh crime scenes and just do the work. And like any detective I watched, and one of them said, I've learned from you, whether it's psychic or not, soak up the scene. Don't use your equipment. Just walk the scene, feel the scene, and see what happens. And as a result, those who followed that said that it took them about 30% of the time it normally took them to work a case. And I worked on cold cases, fresh cases, federal agencies, took 7 different oaths, had police academy training temporarily as an auxiliary because they wanted me to be official. I've had 2 badges, one I kept, one I gave back because they thought I was the one who turned him in, a chief of police, and I wasn't. But I received one from a commissioner for things I can't discuss, but it's in my police wallet that he gifted me with, and that's what I carry as my wallet. Not a female wallet, but a little black leather one with a badge in it. And I treasure it because it represents what so many detectives I've met and so many FBI agents and others in different agencies, they live with this afterwards when they retire. So if they can,
Mm,
I can. Female and
mm.
male, if you can go through that, if you can go through suffering, if you can go through knowing what the world has been like and is, and how many children are abducted and trafficked or starved or anything, then I can do whatever it takes for me to do the work if I can be of any service whatsoever. Even a little bit. If I can make a difference, that's my job.
Right, Nancy. So I'd like to know, how did you build the resilience to keep going when people doubted or dismissed you?
Well, they always dismissed me when I was a child. So I learned that in my family, it didn't matter what I thought. It just mattered that I did what they wanted me to do. They never considered that I was a person. And I get that for a lot of people who grow up in, depends on generations, etc. So in that generation, a child was seen, not heard. And so I was able to keep to myself a lot. And so I didn't experience, I thought, that anyone knew that I had these weird happenings, that I knew things about people. I knew when they were dying. I knew. But as time went on, over the first 20 years or so, it became evident that I knew things because I'd blurt them out and then they would happen to the exact minute sometimes. I learned that I would explore for whatever reason. I decided it was more important for me to understand, well, if I could know that, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's ever done that. So if not, what does that mean about who we actually are? We're limitless. We're wireless. We're all connected. So I started making up practices. That's why I put in Soul Detective, How to Solve the Inner Mystery of You, the book. But I also put it in The Life of a Psychic Detective and Nature Speaks, my animal one, because I want the techniques I develop. You can make your own up, right? And I made up all mine because I didn't have money. I was disabled and stayed disabled for a long time. So I made up things as I went, and everything was go inside. That's the one thing I absolutely believe. We are all gifted with sacred, divine powers, every single one of us. And we have to trust what's inside us. And the more we trust it, I look for what I learned, evidence and proof of what is. And so I would write it all down, and I would suggest everybody somehow get it down on a program in your computer, on paper, anywhere, your intuitions, your journal, anything you can, and then get feedback when you can. That's what I did. That's all I did. And it attracted a lot of wonderful people to me to learn from and to be with as friends and family. Because I didn't have much of a family of origin. Very
Hmm.
very few small, family, and then they were gone. But that's how I created my own family worldwide.
Hmm.
I love it. I learned we are all connected. It's real. Every tree, every blade of everything, every flower, everything's connected. And I thought, oh my God, we're wireless. And I thought about that back in the 70s. And I thought, now how are we going to do that? And now you're doing it here.
Right. So, Nancy, for the listener right now who feels like they are going through a death of their old life, maybe a old career change, a diagnosis, a loss of identity, and they are scared of the unknown. So, what's the very
Mm.
first step to trusting their own intuition?
I believe that there are two first steps. Deep breathing will release some of the fear all by itself. Belly breathing like a baby. And start from scratch. Create a belief system you would love to live in, even if every other part of you is saying, can't be, can't be, can't be. Because the brain is just a machine. It is your computer. So you can train it. It's yours. You're the orchestra leader. You're the director of your life. Only we're not taught that. And so we begin at the beginning and go, what belief would I want to create for myself? What words would I create for that belief that would be my dream? And no matter whether I believe it or not, I'm going to hold it as, okay, I'm going to take it as my dream and my belief for now. And if it doesn't work out, well, then I'll create a new one. In other words, whatever belief you hold now that is frightened and worried and concerned about, oh my God's kind of what's going on in my life, that comes from past. It doesn't come from present. When we grab the present and stay in it in the moment, then we can deep breathe and believe we have a lot more to us than we've ever explored. And that's the fear. Here's what I also learned that might help. Most people are afraid of the unknown because they believe that underneath it all, I'm not so good. Underneath, because they still blame themselves for other influences in their life when they're little. And all I'm saying is, your soul is beautiful. It's filled with light. You're wonderful. You're sacred. You're divine. You got lots to you that you haven't explored. And there's nothing to be afraid of. Underneath is better. You've been hiding from the great stuff in you because you were trained to hide from it. And once we get that message and we know it, we can crack it right open.
So, Nancy, after like a decade solving crimes, healing trauma, and bridging the gap between the seen and unseen, so what does being successful truly mean to you?
What's successful for? Twofold. I've learned self-acceptance. I've learned to like myself regardless of what I find. We're not perfect, and I don't aim to be. And I have my ups and downs and my moods, not but, and I watch my language. So success for me has always been accepting myself the way I am, learning anything I can to improve my growth, my personal growth, goes along with that territory. Look in the mirror. And regardless of how would I put it, whether there's anything like money coming in or practical things of any sort, that has never been my priority. I love what I do, and I do what I love has been always my priority. I told my kids when they were young, when I was disabled, I wore a full body brace 11 years, etc. And I was the sole earner for many, many years of their life. And I said to them, look, if I don't have enough here, we'll pitch a tent, I'll pick fruit, but you will never, never watch me sell my soul in any sense of the word. I will only do what I believe is the best thing I can do for the world and myself and you. And that's all it is. And that's all it's ever been for me.
Great. So, Nancy, for our listeners who want to learn more about you, connect with you, or read your book, and perhaps learn more about your workshop, so where is the best place for them to go?
My website has everything and every way to connect. And it is my name, nancyorlenweber.com. Very simple. And everything is there, and everything is connected to that I do. And they can always join my Facebook pages. I have a group one called Psychic Detective, and my name. And it was made by a lady in Denmark. I didn't make it. So
Awesome.
I know people are, if we give room to everybody to be themselves,
Mhm.
anyone could heal their wounds, their traumas, you know? We could all do that, but we need the space inside us to give permission to us, to ourselves, that we are entitled to like ourselves and to help ourselves.
This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I'm honored to have you on the podcast today.
I am so honored to be with you, Ezekiel.